Hi, welcome back to Brewing Ideas on Scenic Space, the director's process up to meeting the set designer. Welcome to class 2. It was really lovely meeting some of you on Friday and hearing some interesting and good questions. I hope we'll continue to see each other next Friday to continue the conversation. By now, I think Erica must have sent everybody a PDF or a link to the Frank McGuinness translation of A Doll's House. So hopefully you're all reading it and getting it and starting to get inside the play. Okay, so let's get started. I'm going to share my screen with you and start our slideshow, new slideshow that looks like the last one because we are starting from, I'm moving to the same slide that I left you with when I introduced you to this class. Except that something has changed. It's a deep dive, not a wide dive, because I know you don't say a wide dive, but what I meant was branching out. But someone just told me that that's not a way of saying. But most importantly, I actually inverted the order. Now you see that first you have intuitive emotional response and second text analysis and research. So over this class, just so we all remember, we're going to go through the first phase of the dive that a director does into a play. It's led by curiosity. There is no censorship, and it's a bit of a surfing. It doesn't yet go so deep. You will see why later. So why intuitive emotional response first? Because you first read the play, and during that first read is when you actually start catching your first impressions, how you react to things in the play. Why are these important and what are they? Number one, what are they? We generally enter into relationship with something and immediately feel either sympathetic or hostile to elements and different things. The same happens with the play, and it's generally kind of easier to catch what you dislike than what you like at first. So that's what I've started doing it. I want to just spend one moment to say to you why it is so important, this. Catching your initial responses puts you in a dialogue that is first and foremost with yourself before you start the dialogue with the playwright and with everything else around the play. It also helps you to understand what really interests you in the play. And it kind of puts you in front of the places where you're going to dig personally. Because the process that you're doing, and then you're going to ask your actors and designers to do, is to challenge themselves in their beliefs, assumptions, in the thing that haunt them, that they dislike about the play. And eventually you're asking your audience to do the same. I always say a work of art can only be as deep as the artist is willing to go. So that's why catching the first glimpses of these shows you the way. When you do a production, the work of a director is to be the aesthetic mediator of your own sensitivity. You cannot speak from any other point of view, not from, I don't know, the social values point of view or anything else. What we want to see is how this piece moved the director and what kind of, and the whole team, of course, and what kind of reflections and associations the director could make. So let's move on to how I do this. Intuitive emotional responses and first impressions. This is an inspiration from Anna Mendieta, visual artist. In 1975, she did a series of silhouettes, and this one specifically spoke to me in relation to the play. We'll see why later. So antipathies and hostilities, or antipathies, hostilities, and sympathies. I just, wrote down quickly, and I want to kind of quickly go through these things. First thing that irked me is really the nicknames that Torvald calls Nora: skylark, squirrel, bird, child, doll. My first thought was that this is so dated. So if I want to actually do a production of A Doll's House, one of the first things that I'll have to work on is an adaptation. And so something came to mind, which I just put it as an example, a play written by a Spanish playwright, Eva Redondo, called Cuidado con el perro. This play, I haven't read it yet, but I'd like to. This play speaks about very, plunges you more than speaks about, in contemporary situations where condescendence and patriarchalism are very subtle but existing throughout each and every situation. And so I'd be interested in doing quite a research on how could we make it contemporary, this relationship between Torvald and Nora. Then the thing that really is the one that I dislike the most is Torvald's righteousness, hence his condescendence on Nora. His set of values, I could call him his moral highness, and the fact he thinks he's in the right no matter what. I have a hard time, I wrote, with Christine's actions throughout the play, but I think I do relate to her and understand this character, but it's hard to negotiate for me. And I absolutely love, I find adorable Dr. Rank, more than adorable, it's not a dog. He's deep, and his dance with death is so compelling, as well as the fact that he's not so central to moving on the plot, and yet is necessary to the duo of Nora and Torvald and how things evolve later on. Then something I do is I try to catch lines in the play that I say the lines that pierce, the lines that really jump out of the page and kind of catch you in one way or another. Then I just write them down. Later on, I try to choose one or two, but right now I kind of wrote, a bunch of them. It would spoil our marriage. It would spoil everything, Nora says to Christine when speaking about the loan that she took to save her husband. I did get such a lot of pleasure in sitting and working and earning money. I could spend all my time playing with the children. I'm such a happy woman. You know how much Torvald loves me, how unbelievably much he loves me. If I thought differently, I hid it because he wouldn't have liked it. That's how I survived. I have other duties that are just as sacred. You might notice that all the lines that I've chosen are from Nora. Surprise! This phase is not about drawing conclusions, but it's about noticing things. So let's move on. No, actually, sorry. Let's move backward. Let's stay there for a second. Now I'm going to stop sharing for a moment the screen. So what I want to tell you is that there is not a linear way, as I mentioned before, of doing this type of work, and it does follow your curiosity. So after I caught my first impressions and first emotional reactions, I started wondering about the play. I want to know about Ibsen, of course. I want to know about the first time the play was performed and its reception, number one. So Ibsen was born in Norway in 1828. So when he wrote A Doll's House, it was 50 years old. Let's go and let's regain actually now the slideshow, because I kind of want to jump ahead. And let me see, how can I do this? I'm gonna end the show and go to 14 and start it again, I think, maybe. Oh no, I'm so sorry. It's moving me through. Okay, I'm just gonna go fast until I get to the one. And you're seeing fast things that you'll see later, but that's okay. They go fast, you can't even read them probably. There you go. So the opening of the play was December 21st, 1879 at the Royal Theatre in Copenhagen, Denmark, not in Norway, but in Denmark. So first off, you can imagine December 21st is probably as close as they could get to Christmas. Now the play is set in 1879 in a town in Norway. So already you go like, okay, this is super incredibly contemporary. What happened is that the reactions were insane. There was a storm of outrage controversy that started in Denmark that actually went into newspaper worldwide. In fact, the play was very quickly performed in other countries, most of the time in its original form. And yet we come to the interesting part, the interesting example of Germany, followed then by England. In Germany, the main actress refused to play the end as it was. Now, at the time, there were no copyrights, so Ibsen himself decided to rewrite the ending, because otherwise someone maybe less good than him as a playwright, would have just, taken apart what he wrote and do a terrible ending. So he preferred to do it himself. So he wrote it. And what he did is that at the end, when after Nora said that she wants to leave, Torvald convinces her to see the children. And then in front of the children, she collapses and the curtain falls. So it's implied that she stays. Now, Ibsen himself called this later on a disgrace, something that should have never happened in writing it. Now, it wasn't contemporary just because it was set in the same year as it was performed, but it's really because Ibsen drew a lot of the plot of the play from real life events, and more specifically from the life of Laura Keeler, who was a friend of his. Laura was a writer as well, and she had a husband who was sick of tuberculosis, and so she needed to gather money to save him. She wrote to Ibsen and sent him her new book, and asked him to recommend her to his editor. He did not like the book, and so he refused. And then she got a loan. She forged a signature. She was found out, and the husband committed her to an asylum. She stayed in the asylum for a couple of years until he asked to have her back, and then she went back. So this is the story of Laura Keeler. Ibsen wrote the play specifically when she was already in the asylum, in the time she was in the asylum. How interesting. And this play was published first as a book. It was published just before, at the beginning of December, just before it actually was performed. And in a few months, it was sold out 3 times. So this is the play that made Ibsen famous and made him rich because of the sale of the book. So he spoke about this play. Of course, he became a public figure, even known much beyond Scandinavia. And I was interested in hearing what he had to say about the play. So I need to go backwards. And he spoke about a modern tragedy. And in a note that was written in Rome in 1878, so while he was writing it, he wrote, "A woman cannot be herself in modern society, since it is an exclusively male society, with laws made by men and with prosecutors and judges who assess feminine conduct from a masculine standpoint." We'll see later what he said in 1898. It's not right now that is important. I find this quite interesting indeed. And this started to make me think about, of course, the situation of women at the time and during the first part of the modern era. So I'm going to go back in my slideshow to, actually I'm going to stop sharing for a second, and I'm going to pause the recording. Okay, that was Erica calling me, so all good. We're going to resume back. I'm so sorry. Okay, so we are getting back to really, like, we're going now to, yeah. So I was very curious about the place of women and in society and how this modern society was evolving and developing at the time. And I thought of another book I read, which is, of course, which is Anna Karenina by Tolstoy, which really so well, over 800 pages, goes through the end of imperialist Russia. And, it's Russia, but anyway, it's very similar to Scandinavia at the time in terms of the end of idealism and into modernism, and how aristocracy started losing the overall power. And there is because of the first phase of industrialization, there is new jobs available and the rise of the middle class. Modern era is the first time when actually standards of living increase, and with all sorts of consequences at the time. Now, Anna Karenina really specifically focuses on extramarital affair, on this woman, Anna, who leaves a child to run to Italy with her lover. And it's kind of a great trip over everything that happens in this time, these 2 moments that clash together. And where we're moving towards. At the same time, now going all the way to today, I found a book which is very interesting as well, called Hard to Do. Hard to Do means what it is hard to do. It's hard to leave a good man or to leave a man for a woman. But actually, what the book is, aside from the joke, which is not a joke at all, actually, it's a semi-scientific research, historical research on breakups, on feminine breakups, on the capacity to break up a marriage. So it goes from the moment where marriage was a mere contract to the time where actually marriage should or was going to involve a romantic love. And it is very interesting because it really explains how it's also a product of urbanization. You know, women before went from not just women but couples were living in a larger family setting where the values were sacrificed, daily sacrifice. You wouldn't even ask yourself if you were happy or not, I guess. And then when they move to the cities, they are much more isolated, and so the other person needs to become a little bit more than it was before in the rural settings. Anyway, so this was something that I encountered too, and then from here I started just letting emerge some themes or some images and clusters of images that run throughout the play. One being the doll, you know, a doll's house. She's called a doll. She treats her own children as dolls, and there's definitely a writer, an Italian writer, her name is Elena Ferrante. I'm sure some of you are familiar with her work, My Brilliant Friend. And it's so interesting how much this image of the doll is recurrent in her writing. It is in The Lost Daughter, a book where a woman literally steals a doll from a little child and then holds her hostage. And as well as in My Brilliant Friend, where two girls lose their dolls because they throw them into basically it was called a sous-sol. That's French. Into whatever, you know, where you put old things down in a cellar type of thing. And then they think that a man who is a mafia boss stole those dolls, and so they go to get them back, but the man of course doesn't have them, and he offers money to them instead. And later on, one of them recriminates, saying to the other, saying we should never have accepted money instead of our dolls. Anyhow, it's a very rich image to mine. What came to mind was Louise Bourgeois and her work. She's been, she's a sculptress, French-American sculptress, and she's worked so much with pieces of fabric and recreating these beautiful and beautiful and haunting dolls, like the one that you see here called the Temper Tantrum. Louise Bourgeois' work really stood out for me in relation also to another theme, which is the tarantula, the spider, let's say. So there is this moment in the play, you all know it, it's kind of the best moment in the play, I feel, at least for me. It's when Nora dances La Tarantella. La Tarantella, it's a dance from south of Italy that was supposed to be an antidote to the bite of the tarantula spider, which was poisonous and fatal, could be. So when you dance this dance, it's to get out the poison from your body, and it's an image. It's a dance where the dancer looks like she's possessed by spirits, by demons. It's kind of a ritual as well. And I was interested in how in Louise Bourgeois' work the image of the spider keeps coming back as a mother. You know, it's in this one in 99, it's called Maman, for example. And it's so interesting when you see people through it, and then it looks like the spider is keeping her children, tiny children, under as hostages or so forth. Anyway, there are so many ways of looking at this, of course. One thing I put down there is for you to understand a bit better what it is, the tarantella, is Il Ballo di San Vito. Vinicio Capostella is singer-songwriter, Italian from the South as well, and he's done a rendition of this dance in a song. And the video, it's quite old, but I think the video is very interesting as well to watch. So you can even stop right now this video and watch it. Click on the link, see it, and then come back to it, and then you start to understand where I'm going with these things. This is really I just want to say it's an overview. I'm not getting so deeply into things because otherwise I have to keep you here for weeks. The next, so the tarantula and the movement towards the idea of the mother brought me to something else with another artist, a theater artist. Her name is Angelica Lidel. She is a woman from Spain, a director, choreographer, playwright, and performer, actor. And to her work, I experienced her work in 2013 at the FTA, and she came with a show called Todo el cielo sobre la tierra, El síndrome de Wendy. And the show is about many things, and it's it's hard to resume in a few lines, but a big part of the show, it's actually her, as you see her right there in the picture. It's Angelica in a rant that lasts, I think, 40 minutes against mothers. It's something that created big controversy. It was really at the moment for me as well. I was just, my second child had just been born a few months, 6 months before, and she's so articulate and violent in a way that shook something that I felt was a taboo of our time. And I go back to, even at the time of Ibsen, I go back to the woman, the German actress who did not want to perform the end like that. And I think that nowadays, it's not uncommon that a woman leaves her husband, but leaving the children is another thing. So what might be at stake and what might be interesting is actually to look at the figure of a mother. And I think that this goes deep into myself as well. What I carry from the past about who a mother is and what a mother should be, and many, many, many true things that this woman was capable of saying, and Angelica Lidel. I want to, in the next phase, I'll definitely want to get deeper into this. Now, the last thing that I want to invite you to do, or to just give you as a tool, is something that I call the images that burn. And I'm going to read you a quote by Sarah Kane, that says, "Theater has no memory, which makes it the most existential of the arts. No doubt that is why I keep coming back, in the hope that someone in a dark room somewhere will show me an image that burns itself into my mind, leaving a mark more permanent than the moment itself." This is for me the definition of what a burning image is. And often as directors, we either catch them in other work of art or we see them in our imagination as well. So I'm going to just speak about three that came to mind. One is an image that is part of a movie that's very recent. I think it was I don't know why all the dates are not there. I put them in the slideshow and then they got lost. Anyway, Portrait de la jeune fille en feu. I think it was just in 2018 or 19 even that the movie came out, from a French director. The image, like, look, this is the trailer, so you can watch it. The image is at the end, and it's the image of this woman with a long dress, and the end of the tail of her dress is actually burning. Another image that I'm really drawn to is in Tarkovsky's Mirror. Mirror is and Sacrifice as well, but Mirror. So Tarkovsky is one of my favorite artists, like a réalisateur, you say filmmakers, an artist. And in this specific, I wrote it is at 109, there is this image of a woman watching a house that's burning down. Similarly, in Sacrifice, which I suggest everybody to watch because you can find it, the integral version online, there is the burn down of a house. So, house burning. Louise Bourgeois has a lot of other works on domesticity and on family and marriage. It's something really great to mine in there. I'm going to move on. So let's breathe. I'm going to actually maybe even come back for a second to us. How do you do that? Stop sharing. Can I stop sharing? 1 second. Yes, sorry, it took me a while and I thought I was not recording anymore. God, all good, we are recording. So, okay, we're gonna move on and I'm going to be a bit quick if I can. concise, not quick, on the second part of our class, which is text analysis and research. And I want to give you some tips, just or some tools. So again, sharing again, and we get back to text analysis. So I say text analysis. Oh, not again. Apologies. I'm like, impossible for me to be technologically smart. Tag. We're going to go through again. And here we are. Tips for a critical imagination. Very important for me that I borrowed this idiom, this expression from Eleanor Fuchs, which is the first point that you're going to see, because in text analysis, it's very important for me to get a bit out of the box of the typical charts that we do and that I do as well. So that's why my very first tool is a short 4 pages article written by this Yale drama school professor, Eleanor Fuchs, which thinks of a play as a small planet. I like her point of view. Like, it's an article that is short and it's all questions about a play, but they start from this metaphor that everything in a play works like in an ecosystem. Everything is related to every other element. And so when you start digging into a play and looking at it, it kind of works if you think, how is this little planet? How does it work? What are the rules of the planet? What are the the things that makes it turn and makes it work, that makes it self-sufficient in itself? So I'm offering to anyone who wants to tell me on Friday if you want to receive this article. I can send it as a PDF, or maybe I'll just ask Erica to do it and be done. Then the second tool is something that most of you probably know, which is Katie Mitchell's The Director's Craft. Specifically for this phase, chapter 1 to 5 are those that really take you through a deep, in-depth text analysis. You ask a ton of questions and it gets to kind of all the way to starting then discussing things with your designers. Don't go there yet. And then the other thing that I generally do is I do some charts, but specifically what I like to do is to try to see a play or an element of a play as an image. So try to make them, for example, drawing the dramatic action in each scene, or seeing visually the character's presence. So tracking every time that the character is present and when it comes back, and then drawing lines and colorful lines for each character, and then at a glance seeing it and realizing, oh wow, interesting, when this character comes in and when this other one doesn't, and when who meets and who doesn't, who never meets, and so forth. And just even visual drawings of things that come from data from the play are very interesting, full of information. One other thing that I always do, is a bit of a must for me, is to read all the lines of the characters from beginning till the end without stopping, without any other lines. It so reveals, and out loud, reading them out loud, it reveals tones about the play, even before about the character. So that's one thing that I suggest you do. Then, about the research that I've done so far, I just kind of want to lead you through why I went that place. And behind there needs to be kind of always something that comes from the play. So for example, when I was researching modernism, it was interesting to me to find out how much in modern times, what was the wealth and what was just of the aristocracy can be now of everyone. A very specific example is beautiful clothing. It's in the play. Nora herself, she says, oh, isn't it beautiful wearing beautiful fabric, dresses that are made with beautiful fabric and expensive as well. And it's, in modern times is when a sense of an aesthetic sense is born, is more among a larger part of the society, while before it was exclusive to aristocracy, for example. And so I'm going to just kind of go through a few of these things. And then, but I'm not going to get into depth because research you can all do, and really it would take weeks to kind of do it properly. But we don't need to do that either. So I just want to actually read you something else that Mr. Ibsen said in the Norwegian Women's Rights Conference in 1898. I must disclaim the honor of having consciously worked for the women's rights movement, since I wrote without any conscious thought of making propaganda. I am not quite clear as to just what this women's rights movement really is. Now, you see, there's a big difference from the first quote that I wrote and this one, but actually there isn't. And I just wanted to bring it out because it came up last year with a student of mine, a director, a student of mine, who kind of say, no, Ibsen was never a feminist and he never was for women. And in a sense, it's true. He was interested in human beings. And yet he could see through, he saw what the situation of women was at the time. But at this moment, if we take that quote, I mean, it obvious, to me, it's obvious why he said it. It's like, he is a poet first and foremost. So he doesn't want to be taken as the manifesto of any movement in itself. Doesn't take anything away from him and from his writing. We already went through the reception of the play, which really pushed me to see how extremely contemporary and what a powerful place theater had at the time. And the question is there, can we access that power again? Can we cause a scandal in a good sense? I mean, can we shake our own society through theater? I think we can. I don't think we're doing it so much, but I think we can. Modernism. So we spoke a little bit about modernism already without getting too much into it. What really interested me is to see how between idealism and modernism, there was a necessary other step, which is romanticism. You know, romanticism is the supremacy of the power of nature and the sublime. It is emotions and senses over intellect and over reason. So what romanticism did for the later come of modernism, it opened up to individual experience and the individual feelings and emotions. And without that, we would have never come to modernism, which deals more with reality or realism, and yet it accesses something that before was just not the subject of art in any way. Before it was a religious, mythological themes, and not anything that common human beings could feel. So much about modernism, it's all over the play as well. So it's the fact that the Torvald himself is a lawyer and that his best friend is a doctor. Those are the professions that rise the highest in the middle class. Anyway, I just invite you to go further and deeper in understanding that time, because it's because of course, if I come back to Nora's choices, they can only be understood if contextualized. And then I was interested in seeing in modern art what that meant, and the fact that realism also caused a reaction to itself, which was symbolism. And Ibsen is both a realist and a symbolist, a modernist altogether. Interesting to see the very first painting that starts modern art is Le Déjeuner sur l'herbe by Edouard Manet in 1863. Might look like a realist type of painting, but actually is not at all, for the use of light in it, for the use of the brushstroke. Actually, we see it very neat right now, but the real painting, if you see it, has it's at Musée d'Orsay, I think, in Paris. It looks unfinished in some points, and this was unprecedented at the time. Not to mention, of course, the naked body of a woman and two men in conversation, not even noticing her, and so forth. Anyway, Impressionism, I said symbolism, I'm so sorry, I meant Impressionism at the same time. Was a bit of the reaction was in search for more the spiritual as well, and for something that was an intimate relationship to nature. It starts with Monet's painting Impression, Sunrise of 72, and I just picked a couple of other paintings that could go forever again, but there's no point in going forever. But I was interested in placing there the Scream by Munch, who is a Norway, is a painter from Norway, from exactly where Ibsen comes from. next to a painting by the guy called Absinthe. Absinthe, it's absinthe is what especially French people drink. It's as an apéro, but it's also absinthe means absent, not there. And the image of this woman next to her husband, I suppose, kind of lost in herself and not at all present. I find it so very interesting to depict maybe women, some women at a time, and not just at a time. Now, this is an important point. So in this research, at some point I came across an article, very interesting article by A.S. Bayat, who is a writer and journalist who writes on The Guardian. This article was written on May 2nd, 2009, just before a new version of, not a new version, a new production of A Doll's House was about to appear, I think at the Donmar House in London. Anyway, she speaks of A Doll's House and refers a lot to the book by Toriel Moy, I don't know how to pronounce her name, called Henrik Ibsen and the Birth of Modernism, which I'd love to read, by the way. Seems like an interesting book. And the article is called, the title is Blaming Nora, and it is about how much the writer dislikes Nora. I'm going to just read you a quote that I put there from the article. It says, "The glory of A Doll's House is that it asks us to care for a small-minded person in the moment of a realization of our own small-mindedness." Now, this article really did strike a chord in me. I reacted really, really strongly to it. She's a long article in which she speaks so much about how Nora is frivolous and selfish and not really interested in anyone else, so much so that when she speaks to Dr. Rank and he's talking about his death, she's kind of uninterested and jokes about it. Or, she brings up all sorts of examples. This article really, how can I say, it hurt me a bit. It hurt me because I felt that she was, first off, judging this woman from a contemporary point of view, this character, not this woman. But at the same time, it kind of did not allow the fact that if in A Doll's House Nora comes to an awakening, well, it implies that she was a bit asleep before. And by being asleep, it's exactly all those things that she dislikes in her. And so, yeah, this is something that I'm digging, and that in the next class we'll talk about more. And it really has to do with the fact that, it speaks to me very personally too, with the realizations of my own small-mindedness as well. And then I go like, but hey, don't we give a chance to anyone aside from our likes and dislikes? Like, would Nora be loved more if she was less of a wealthy woman? Well, she's not yet wealthy, but she's going to be. But she definitely has servants, and yet the point is, at the time, then when Ibsen writes this story, a woman that takes the actions that Nora takes could not be but the profile of the woman she is, meaning her own servant Anne-Marie could never get to that awakening and those realizations. Like nowadays, a woman who works in a factory for 70 hours a week might never think to leave her husband because she has to feed the 5 children at home. It's, anyway, just opening up on this. This can happen when a director works. You come across other people's thoughts and they spark something in you. So, this is kind of the beginning for me. It's a bit of can I say trampoline? I'm not sure. No, a diving board into something else that I'm thinking about for getting to position myself as a director, which I'll develop next time. I am actually going to not take you through my women's rights research, but of course I was very interested to see, okay, what happened at a time if a woman left a husband, what were her rights and what would she walk away with? Almost nothing, to be honest. So deciding to leave was deciding to give it all up completely. this time between 54 and 79, it's called it's called an awakening consciousness. And yet laws are very slow to follow, even though this is kind of positive what's written in here. It's not, as we know, it's not equality, very far from being reached. One other research that I did was, which I'm also not going to get into it, but that stems from the play, is how many times someone is called someone, how many times Nora and I think 4 times, and Christine are called hysteric. And so, of course, it's necessary to understand what hysteria was at the time and where it came from. And it came from, the Greek word uterus, and it was actually speaking of a physical, let's say, disease. And then it turned into so many other things, and women were tortured because of something that was considered a pathology that nowadays is mostly looked at. We don't use that term anymore, thank God. It's mostly like melancholia and depression or other things, or madness maybe, and so forth. Anyway, end of slideshow. Let's get out of this, and let's stop sharing. There you go. So I'm unaware of time, but I think this was long enough for everyone. I'm resuming again the steps that we've taken were to get into the play, to branch out in all directions, searching for visual, film, music, any type of inspiration in relation to the play, and to try to start highlighting maybe some themes that are emerging in the play, and to really deeply understand how we feel about the elements that are the characters and the story, and how things on the page evolve. Thank you for following today. I wish you a great week, and I'm looking forward to see you and speak to you on Friday, for whomever is willing to do, has a question, or would like to connect.